Welcome to the Heron outlet. Oh my God, we can see each other's faces. This is so random. This is so odd. We've never had the opportunity to do this before. Alex, it's so wonderful to see you. Austin, so wonderful to see you. She is Alex Winley. He is Austin Robillard. I am Ian Hest. And what a wonderful chance to get to now expand not only the podcast on Spotify, on Apple, everything where you get your podcast, but also now on YouTube. We launched yesterday and everything that came with it. And guys, first, I want us to talk about that, how excited we are for the launch on YouTube and what we're going to be able to do from talking about player interviews, from talking about tactical analysis, from talking about player access, coaches access, and fans that we're going to be able to do. What are you looking forward to most as we get this venture started?
Personally, I will say that I am more than happy to take on anything that goes in and around the stadium. I think that whether it's seeing players and getting interviews from them, whether it's seeing fans and getting interviews from them, or if it's, this potential away trip that we have coming up to Portland, I can't wait to go out there and hopefully do some kind of vlog. I love interactions with fans and players and anything in and around the game. That's kind of my favorite part, stadium atmosphere here and there. I absolutely adore that kind of stuff, and that's what I'm going to be trying to bring to you guys, and all the fun stuff too. I mean, I know coming up, hopefully we're going to be doing a little FIFA ratings kind of thing, just to give you a little insight there, looking at Inter Miami's FIFA ratings and how I disagree with EA a ton, but it's okay. We're going to go on and on about that kind of stuff, and I can't wait to bring you all the fun action, the fun interactions in and around Driving Stadium, and maybe even across the country.
Yeah, and as far as, the YouTube channel goes and the tactical analysis, I'm really excited to get that going. I know fans may not necessarily like it, but as a fan of the game, as a bit of a nerd, I do like, breaking down the game, seeing how things work on the pitch, getting to pick the minds of, managers. Neville, he's done a really good job with Inter Miami this season. And I think that's such an underappreciated a part of the game. Finding space, channels. What positions, why some formations work, why some don't. And with this new medium that we're going on, it's going to be an absolutely fantastic time, a visual way to show the beautiful game and how Inter Miami play it.
But this is the Heron outlet, and we do need to talk brass tacks. Last weekend, it did not look good for Inter Miami. It was a very difficult 4-0 loss to New York Red Bulls. And, I really don't know where to start on it. It was an unfortunate situation with the early red card. They didn't ever really seem to get things going with how they wanted to. And so where do you go from here? The national narrative was very easy to go back to. Oh, look at Inter Miami at home and how horrible they are and how they always have these blowouts. And it didn't feel like that. And I don't know if that's a local versus national thing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I I think that the not necessarily a fluke, but this doesn't deter me from the fact that Inter Miami are still in pretty good form considering the two losses they've had to New York teams. I think it just had to do with, well, first of all, you had two players on brink of yellow card suspension and tensions were always going to be high. And after the red card, it only, went downhill from there. And that's kind of what you would expect to begin with. And I don't think they ever got off on the front foot in this match. They lacked their ability to take control due to the pressing from the Red Bulls. And I think it was a pretty fantastic game plan from New York. They outclassed Miami in every aspect of the game. Anything that you could possibly think of, New York Red Bulls just did it better. And obviously the red card didn't help, and the poor play from personally the DPs also did not help at all. So there are a lot of different factors there, and it was just a night you sweep under the rug, in my opinion, and hopefully move on to the next. But with what happened in this game, you can't necessarily forget about what happened and move on to the next because of the yellow card accumulation suspensions for LGP, and then you have a yellow card accumulation suspension and a red card suspension coming up for Nico Figal going into the next match. So now you have a lot to think about if you're Phil Neville, what you're going to do going into the next game, and whether it's change systems, you definitely have to change players and personnel. You have to do your best to get rid of whatever happened in the Red Bull match. And I know that's what a lot of players are saying. I think Phil Neville saying as well, we're just going to do our best to forget it. It's exactly what they did against NYCFC, that 2-0 loss. I mean, I personally didn't really remember what happened in that match because they just continued a good run of form right afterwards. And they had a good run of form going in before that. And this good run of form that came in before the Red Bulls game can still continue past it. They just need to pick it up a little bit and hopefully get a win at Nashville at home.
Austin, I want to challenge you on that because I remember back when the 6-game losing streak happened, and it was so much of this is what this team is. And then they had this amazing run of form. And it wound up being, oh, well, that amazing run of form was a fluke. Let's go back to the 6-game losing streak. It was so quick on how it happened that this team was all of a sudden terrible again.
Well, yes, but I think that much like in a singular game of basketball, it's all what's the saying? A game of runs. It's a season of runs. And that's, in a 34-game season, especially in a tough league with a ton of parity in Major League Soccer, you're going to have runs here and there. And no, they showed me no signs of optimism in that 6-game losing streak, but I saw a vast turnaround. And I think that I saw enough from them in that turnaround that I have belief and confidence that they have enough players and enough belief in themselves as well to get the job done and hopefully push for the playoffs. This Red Bull game, Phil Neville's got to do better. Personally, I think that he was doing a really good job managing games for the most part. But this one, he even said it. He had it all wrong. I think that he got it wrong on all fronts. And two, the red card helped. The red card didn't help. The yellow cards didn't help. The way the referee managed the game, I think, was also pretty poor. There was we can go on about that, and we could probably go on about that in every single match Inter Miami has ever played. But the game
only at home. They are the worst referee team at home that I've ever seen in my entire life. We'll get to it later.
It's unbelievable how that happens. But yeah, I mean, from a tactical standpoint, I know Alex knows better than I do, but the Red Bulls, I mean, they just outclassed them. And I think that you have to move into Nashville and try and get the game plan right.
Yeah, as far as that game goes, it was a mess. I think from 10 minutes in, I had a feeling that Inter Miami weren't going to do a lot of damage. Like Austin said, Neville, he didn't rotate enough. The Red Bulls, they're a young team. Their average age is about 22 versus Miami's 27, and I know Tweedy and Egoin have a lot to do with that. But the way the Red Bulls are set up, they are a team that like to high press. They're a young team. They trained for it. They had the capacity to be able to high press for the duration of the game. And I think I told Austin that in the press box, all Inter Miami needed to do was just brave the storm of the high press for 45 minutes. South Florida, it's hot, it's humid. Eventually they would get tired, and you bring on someone like Carranzo or someone with fresh legs off the bench, who knows, a set piece, like they'll score off a set piece, but, like a set piece or some opportunity where they get the chance to score, Miami could have won that 1-0 if Neville played his cards right. But, unfortunately, like you said, he didn't rotate enough. The guys look tired. And I know they should have done better. Robbie should have scored off that set piece that Gonzalo, he booted in, and Robbie basically missed a free header. And it was a messy game from top bottom. And like you said, it's something that Inter Miami should they should go past it. But the yellow card and the red cards, it's gonna hurt them tomorrow. Nashville, they're a good side, and their defense is one of the best in the league. And I know their supporters have been a bit miffed because the national media with them last year, and Miami got all the hype. Nashville was sort of under the radar, so they still feel some sort of way regarding that. And it's going to be a chip on their shoulder for Nashville. I know they want to get number 2 in the East, and they're up there. Orlando's been slipping, which I've been following their downfall a bit. And yeah, it's going to be a difficult game. I won't lie. I think, yeah, I'm not sure what Neville will do. I don't know if he'll switch formations. He did insinuate that during his pre-match conference, but the back three has just worked so well for Inter Miami. I think switching back to a flat back four, while it could work, I think Nashville also line up in a back five, and numerically they will just outmatch Inter Miami and on the wings and in the midfield, especially if they switch back to the 4-2-3-1. If Miami do, Pizarro's all over the pitch and he doesn't have that positional discipline to link up with Matuidi and Gregory or Chapman or whoever starts in that double pivot. I actually wrote a piece this morning about why the back three has worked so well and why the 4-2-3-1 earlier in the season didn't. So yeah, it's going to be just a difficult match all around.
Let's talk about that eventually.
Okay.
But trust me, I know about the Nashville fans because Lord knows.
Oh yeah,
I heard it.
Yeah, you got jumped by them the other day.
Yeah, and Lord knows that I had to deal with them. For God knows, saying that I think that he should be 4th or 5th, God forbid, in the MVP standings. They really made me feel it, but understandable. Hopefully one day Inter Miami will have somebody who we all can yell about is 4th or 5th in the MVP standings. But as it stands, what do you think is that you need to do with this offense? Because that's really, I keep going back to it. I know I keep going back to it again and again, but that keeps being the part that scares me. 0.1 XG. We talk about 0.9 XG as the benchmark, but 0.1 XG last game. There just seemed to be nothing that was going on.
You have to test Joe Willis in this match. There's no option. And the way you do that, well, I personally don't have the answer, but I think that a lot of it is going to have to do with Robbie being fresh and getting out on the wings. I think it's also has to do with a little bit of Gonzalo Higuain and dropping in and being a little bit more creative, because with possibly Gregory having to play a more defensive role, I actually asked him about this on Monday in the afternoon, if he was, open or knowing that he was going to have to play in a more defensive role given the center backs being out. It's a possibility. He said he's ready to do it. Where are you going to find any creativity in the midfield? And Matuidi has not been able to really provide much. If you have to throw in Jay Chapman, which is probably the option considering Victor Ulloa is probably out, Gonzalo Higuain is going to have to create his own chances, and he's going to have to create chances for somebody else. He's going to have one of his best performances on the year, and not just by a goal scoring metric. He's going to have the best creative games of the year. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about one, Higuain and Gonzalo. Maybe Federico ends up getting the start. Maybe he goes with this other, what he did against Orlando that one time. I really didn't like it, where Pizarro and Robinson were kind of playing under Higuain. Maybe you see that with Federico and Robbie, and you have somebody who can provide service in that way. But to play against this five at the back at Nashville with some very solid defenders is going to be rough nonetheless. And I think Gonzalo Higuain is the main factor in this.
But Austin, let me ask you about that, because Federico, every single time he's been on the pitch, Inter Miami has been improved, but it's always in these short spurts. It's always in these very like minute areas, 10, 20 minutes. It's never for 90 minutes. So I guess I struggle with figuring out how to balance what that looks like.
How many options does Phil Neville have, considering what he's going to have to ask some players to do in this game coming up? If I'm not saying this is for sure, but I might be the only one. I don't know if you guys agree on this. You guys can chime in if you want. I don't personally hate, and I also don't see why Phil Neville wouldn't go with Gregory as a center back option if he is to keep the same five at the back formation. I know that sounds crazy, but I'd put him in the central center back role, maybe being surrounded by McCoon and Leardom. And I think that's an option you have to consider. Maybe that's outlandish, maybe that's crazy, but that's something for me that I'm looking at Phil Neville and asking him, are you considering doing that given the options that you have? And that Gregory is a very good connector at times. I think that there's been spurts where he can play a really good short pass. He can connect the back line to the defense. He's been good at that. And that's why it's part of why Miami has been good at playing out the back along with Nick Marsman. But you're not going to have that with Jay Chapman and Blaise Matuidi only in the midfield. It's not going to be there. And I think that, Federico coming on and maybe playing in a midfield role, whether it's 45 minutes, say it's 60 minutes, maybe just to get out in front and keep a 1-0 lead going into halftime. And then you can change your game plan a little bit. Nashville is not the greatest scoring team. I think we've played them twice to 0-0 draws. And if you can go for that again, I think that's a decent result. But if you get the goal to go ahead, it helps you even more and it helps you game plan for the rest of the match.
So if Gregory moves to center back, for me, like, I'm not gonna do that simply because I think that you're losing things elsewhere, like you talked about, Austin, right? Like, if you have to have those three at the back, I think it's just obvious to say Gibbs is kind of a left center back, kind of not. Leardom is kind of a right center back, kind of not. And you get McCoon in the middle. Why wouldn't you just do that? Alex, help me out.
Personally, I would keep McCoon on the left-hand side just because, he's a lefty. That's easier for him. And while I guess he can play in the center, he's better off, using his feet to get himself out of situations. And I don't completely, though he's been playing well, I don't completely trust him as that middle center back. We've seen Figal play that role. He's basically everywhere on the pitch when he's at his best, and you need to be a real commanding defender to play in that central role. So I wouldn't put McCoon there. I kind of agree with Austin with dropping Gregory back. I think Gregory's willing to play there. He said it. He's willing to play there. I think he's got defensively enough to be able to play there. And even then, I wish I had an illustration. Even in a back three, a lot of times, I think the position is called the libero, where you basically shuttle up and down. So that's middle center back can be essentially a defensive midfielder if you play the formation correctly. So it won't be too far off from where Gregory originally plays, but it is still a defensive role, but he can shuttle up and down the pitch. But all he does is need to get back defensively. And yeah, I think Leardom as that third right center back, although he's got some mixed reviews there. I'd play him there just because he said he's played there before.
Where does that come from, though? Where does that come from?
Leardom as a center back.
Is it just because of his poor play? Is that not people understanding that he's been better the further inside he's come than where he's played?
I think it's that New York City FC game that you guys said that you forgot about. I haven't really, that game really bothered me because tactically, I think the first 15 minutes, Miami could have gotten a goal if they stuck with it. But anyway, it's past that. But yeah, I think that New York City FC game where he was at fault for two of the goals, I believe he gave away a penalty, and then the first goal he was just not tracking Castellanos. So I think that has been imprinted in people's minds. So and in a way, I kind of, I don't know. Leardom's a bit of an enigma. I don't know, like in a flat back four, he does fine, but as a wing back, he's slow. The Toronto game was a perfect example of that. As a center back, he's okay, but he's not as dynamic as a LGP or Figal. So it's definitely going to be a tricky game for Neville and his coaching staff, but I'm intrigued to see what they go with.
So let's say Phil does drop Gregory and plays him in the center back role. You have McCoon on the left, maybe Leardom on the right. That would mean Gibbs as left wing back and then Morgan as right wing back. What do you do in the midfield that gives enough for Miami to keep this consistent play from the back style and try and create chances going forward? Because I think in that scenario, then I think Federico has to be on the pitch the first 45 minutes. I don't think you get enough from Matuidi and Chapman. But that's just me. I don't know where else you really go.
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, I think that there is a world where Matuidi and Pizarro can play in that middle, and then you can have the wide of Robbie and Indy still. and have Pipita up top. I still think that there is that world where that exists.
How much cover does that? I mean, so if you play Pizarro in a pivot with Matuidi in front of that back three, how much cover are you actually giving them? And at the same time, when do you, I mean, what kind of instruction? You're not. And you're not going to just, this is just giving the options, but you have to also, Matuidi does like to get forward at times. He does like to, put himself forth in the press or trying to make passes going forward and leave Gregory behind. You can't do that when Pizarro is going to be playing in a number 8 role, can you? I mean, I think that it provides for a lot of discomfort in certain areas.
See, I thought about that once, just dropping Pizarro deeper because he, for all his faults, he's a very good ball carrier. He's got good ball retention. It's hard to get the ball off him, but like you said, he wants to score. He wants to go forward, so he may not have that positional discipline to stay back and defend. But that's certainly something that I would like to see, maybe dropping him, maybe not in a double pivot, but in a flat 4-3-3, middle three, not necessarily a defensive midfielder, not necessarily a central midfielder, but more of a, just a body taking up that number 8 spot. I would be intrigued to see him there. But as far as the lineup goes, I think I would just start Chapman, Matuidi, have Robbie, if he's fit, on that left side, Higuain, and then Vasilev. And like Austin said, I'd bring on Fede second half, maybe if it's still 0-0 and we need some fresh legs. You throw on Federico Higuain, he'll definitely make something happen. So yeah, it's going to be a tough game because Nashville, they're just really well coached and they've got a good defense. And yeah, I think this is a game where Miami just need a counter.
But that's my thing. That's the thing that I feel like, and we're getting to Nashville preview quicker than I intended us to. But in terms of that, they're good defensively. You need to have as many attacking options as possible.
They're good defensively.
Puts Federico and Jay to the bench that puts Pizarro out there.
You're good defensively with LGP Gall. I
you
guess
don't
that
have
could be a
them,
nickname,
right?
but you don't have them. So you have no idea what kind of defense you're going to have in this match. This is another scenario I want to bring up. Phil Neville has implemented a 5-3-2 at times with 2 strikers. Maybe there could be a midfield 3, and it'd be something that give me a little more comfort with Pizarro, Matuidi, and Chapman, and then Robbie and Pipita up top. Is that something that you would consider? I think that could make sense.
I agree with that. I think that would be the likeliest scenario. Then Pizarro can play in the midfield, and they'll have 2 guys behind them that give him that insurance. But yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. Maybe Carranza gets his start. I know we've been hard on him a lot, but he doesn't seem to play well with Higuain, and you see Higuain get visibly frustrated sometimes, which is understandable. I've talked about Carranza. It's another conversation, but yeah, I don't know if Robbie's fully fit. Neville did hint that he could get some playing time, but yeah, I would go with the 5-3-2 because it gives you some more midfield stability in that regard.
My only thing with that is that it's never looked good. Every single time they've tried it, it's never looked good. And so for whatever reason, I don't know. I just have never had that, I always have that queasy feeling every single time that they do 2 up top, because the offense is a little bit scary, especially against a Nashville team that has looked so dominant defensively. I think they have more shutouts than any team in the league. I think they have double-digit shutouts. And so that's really where my concern would come with that. Guys, let's talk Nico Figal, because he's not going to be playing this upcoming week. Whatever, we'll get into that red card that I have feelings about. But I think that a lot of the rumors that are circulating, what will this mean for him? Let's actually take a step back. Let's talk about the red card and what that meant for the Red Bulls game, because I feel like that completely took everything out of it and completely changed the flow of the game, the thought of the game, and what was going to happen. So Do you think it was justified? Do you think that, in my opinion, the second yellow was a yellow, the first wasn't? So how do you sort of get around that is the question for me.
I think it was fair to give a yellow on both occasions. I think that if advantage wasn't played on that first foul, referee might have gone to VAR and given a straight red. I think that was definitely a possibility if advantage wasn't called. And the fact that advantage was called, they still viewed the possibility of the red and ended up giving up a yellow, which that rule with VAR is kind of bullcrap anyway. But I think that it was a fair yellow. And I think that the second one was an obvious fair yellow. It was just a foolish, not even, he just hockey body checked the guy way away from the ball. It just didn't really make much sense, but that's kind of something you're going to get. And in terms of the game, Figal's impact has gone not necessarily unnoticed or under the radar, but we haven't talked about him much because he just has been so consistent. He has been so good in that central center back role. I am so thankful he is done with these right back days that I was calling for earlier in the season that I'm quickly taking back, or even that right center back role with LGP on the right side of the back three. I think that this middle of the back three suits him so well. And the fact that we haven't talked about him as much is actually, giving him compliments to how good and consistent and the good form he's been in. He has been so solid, almost a rock defensively at times. And I think that losing him, having to change styles was everything, because we know that this new style that they've implemented in the last 12 matches is really what's been the key. It's getting the most out of the players and getting the most qualities out of them. And I think losing him and having to change styles was absolutely everything. But at the end of the day, it was a fair red card, in my opinion, after the 2 yellows. And it is what it is. You live with it, and you live without Figal for 2 more matches, and you have to go with it.
Yeah, they were fair. I that second yellow especially, I was like, he was gonna get sent off. So I was just preparing for it, and yeah, it's gonna be difficult. Nico's been really good for Inter Miami. He's been one of the better players there. I say, him and McCoon, they've upped their game, and LGP as well. What Nico brings to that center role in that back three, it's the sense of, how do I describe? You have to be on your toes. There's a lot of balls that he's over these last 12 games. There's a lot of times where he's just put out fires and had last ditch tackles that, you need to have as a central defender in that back three, because you are the anchor of that defense. And not only is he a good defender, his passing out of the back is absolutely brilliant. That ball to Breck Shea, where Miami ended up winning that game through a Breck Shea goal, which is a meme at this point. That ball that Figal punted into him was absolutely gorgeous, and I kept rewatching it because it was just so good by him. And yeah, against Nashville, Miami's definitely going to miss that, because, like I said earlier, this is going to be a game where Miami won't have too many chances. And with Nashville's back line, they are a bit slow. And if, say, Robbie starts, you can, and if Figal was on the pitch, you could have just, pinged balls over the top, get into their final third and try to make something happen. But with, Figal gone and a back three of, say, McCoon, Gregory, and Leardom will not give you the passing that LGP does, or and Gregory, he's Brazilian, and Brazilians are just inherently good at soccer wherever they are on the pitch. But Gregory could do that, but he's definitely, his strength lie in his defensive midfielder ability. So yeah, that's part of the game that will be taken away for Inter Miami, with Figal and LGP both being out. But Figal, I do think it'll hurt the most, because he's just been an anchor in that back five. And yeah, it's going to be difficult, but it's just the way of the game, and it is what it is. And and on the bright side, there's a silver lining. Both of them will get rest. They've been playing how many straight games, LGP and Figal. So with these suspensions, so they'll get a game off to refresh themselves. And Miami's looking to make the playoff push, so that could be beneficial for them as well.
How much, Alex, just real fast, how much do you think that rest is important? Because one of the big concerns I have, Lewis Morgan is this unsung hero that continues to churn out minutes now for a second straight year, and really doesn't get the credit on that he's out there every single time. We talk about how guys need to be rotated. Inter Miami's dealing with all these injuries. Lewis Morgan's out there day after day after day, minute after minute after minute.
Yeah, I think with Lewis, yeah, he's the type of guy that he's got workhorse lungs, and he's just an absolute unit. He likes to fly up and down that wing, and he's flown under the radar. I know he's not as productive as he was last season, but he does a lot of little things, the small things, really well. He's made that right wing back role his own. The Figal at right back, right wing back experiment is it's over. Let's never have that happen again ever. Nico's strengths play, they lie in him being a center back. But yeah, Lewis Morgan, he's been absolutely brilliant. The set pieces are an iffy thing with him. I do prefer, if Gonzalo would take them more. He's just better at them. No offense to Lewis, but we saw with that Robbie Robinson chance. But yeah, Lewis is great, and I do think that he does need rest. Yeah, he's been all over the place, and Neville was, I believe Miami were down. They were down some goals against the Red Bulls, and Neville just took him off the pitch because it did feel like a lost game, and the Nashville game is definitely more important in regards to playoff. The playoff push. So it was a smart of Neville to take him off, and Lewis definitely needed that rest. But yeah, he's been everywhere, and he definitely deserves. He deserved that rest. I've got nothing to say because it was just a bad game, and Neville was right to take him off. Really,
It was at the half actually when Neville took him off. So I think even then it made even more sense because you had the Figal red card earlier in the first half and you knew things were going to change. You were down 2-0 at that point. I think Phil Neville was very much looking into the future with that Lewis Morgan sub. And I mean, it made sense. As much as you want Lewis Morgan on the pitch, you want him on the pitch in terms of longevity too. And that game seemed done and dusted, and it was done and dusted. It only got worse. Vasilev came on and Lewis Morgan got an extra 45 minutes of rest and will definitely be starting and be a very pivotal piece in this upcoming Nashville match.
Guys, I wanted to talk about for a bit, and I mentioned it, that the national narrative for the past couple of days has been, oh, another huge blowout for Inter Miami at home. And why is Inter Miami always getting blown out at home? And I don't know if that's simply because the New England game and the Red Bulls game were seen by a lot of the national narrative, or if you remove those games, Inter Miami is above 500 and only has a -2 goal differential. I was talking about how there's only 3 games this year: the Montreal weird rain delay, DC, which, like, just don't get me started on that DC 3-0 game. And New York City, I understand, because I truly think that New York City might be one of, if not the best teams in MLS this year. Inter Miami has not lost by multiple goals ever on this. So why do you think that there is this perception of Inter Miami not getting this not only like credit nationally, but just this idea that Inter at home are looking the way that they're looking?
Well, it's because you started off 2020 0-5. You made the playoffs as the 10th seed and you lost 3-0. And then you had the cheating scandal. And then, the narratives are all going to be twisted in a negative manner with how you have come into the league. And I think that it's put eyes on Inter Miami in a negative way, in a way that, they are trying not that the narrative is for Miami to become a laughing stock, but it's someone to point and make fun of when you get the chance. And they haven't really had, when they were on that great stretch of games, there wasn't as much coverage as I expected, given that it's Inter Miami and that, they are trying to be this global brand and have a lot more reach than other MLS clubs. This great stretch of games did not really go noticed in terms of anything outside of South Florida. When they got to 5th place, that was the only time that it was really being shown, when they actually hit the 5th place number. And now this loss is just another setback and another way for people to point and make fun of a team that's gone through a ton of hardships, whether it's by their own fault or not. It's just another way for them to do that. And it is what it is at this point. I think you have to embrace it, right? I mean, there's no other choice but to embrace it and just make the playoffs and shut everybody up. That's how I see it.
Is that how you see it? Like you don't want to have you like, is this like another Miami Hurricane us against the world mentality?
Not to that level, just because I think that the Hurricanes got a lot of that derived from them being so great. Miami have not, Inter Miami have not been great yet. And that, so it's a little different for me, but yeah, I think at this point in time, it is kind of that same narrative where you just have somebody in South Florida look at and be like, haha, they're doing poorly. And it is what it is. I mean,
there's so much South Florida in that though. There's so much South Florida in saying, oh, everybody hates us. We don't care. Let's be jerks. All of that.
Yes, but also at the same time, it's sometimes even the South Floridians who are doing the hating. Am I right? I mean, the fan base of any sports team in South Florida, not to get a little dicey or get anybody on my heels, but it's a winner for the most part. I think that the Heat have a pretty decent fan base, but they've also been really consistent in terms of winning since they came into the NBA. It's a win or I'm not going to be a part of this kind of fan base. Other than La Familia, let me just say I'm talking more about the casual fans, but because La Familia is unbelievable. But in terms of, they sold 18,565 tickets last match. Not that that's how many people showed up, but they sold all of the tickets. They had not done that this year, I don't believe. I think they might have only done it once a couple games back. But other than that, I mean, if you're not winning, they're not going to show up. They're not going to show out. And when you start to win for any South Florida sports franchise, that's when they're going to show up and show out. And then if they're not winning, they're going to jump on the bandwagon and say, ha ha, look at Miami. I think that's just how it's going to go. And you have to prove people wrong at the end of the day.
Yeah, we get plenty of at the Heron outlet. We get plenty of naysayers in our ads, just saying, just ripping players for no reason. It's like they don't necessarily watch the games, and it's frustrating to try to argue with them because they see one thing and they have their biases, so their narrative is already set for them, so they're just going into an argument blinded arguing this one thing that they see, and they frame their entire argument wrong, and it's pretty frustrating. But as far as the national media goes, I've talked about this a lot. I there's a lot of great MLS writers that I read a lot. At the Athletic, Extra Time Radio, those guys are great. But I want to go back to the beginning of the season where there are a lot of there are a bunch of new coaches coming into the league. Hernan Lasada at DC, Josh Wolf at Austin, Phil Neville was one of them at Miami, and Gabriel Heinze at Atlanta. And people were ranking these coaches. They said, Heinze will do well. Josh Wolf will do well because he was Berhalter's assistant. And almost every time, every list that I've read, Neville was at the bottom of this list, which is fine. I wasn't necessarily, he wasn't my first choice or anything, but I was surprised at how little background that some of these articles did on Neville and how his England women's side played. So looking towards today, two of those coaches that I've listed, Heinze is out at Atlanta, and Josh Wolf, who never held a head coaching job ever, he's always been an assistant, and Austin are now dwelling at the bottom of the Western Conference. And I say this to say that, a lot of people, they rightfully so. Yes, Inter Miami did mess up 2020, with that 0-5 start, and this year with that losing streak, rightfully so. There's you're right to criticize, but a lot of people just underestimate Inter Miami and their ability to bounce back and do well, and it showed in underestimating Phil Neville coming here. They didn't really, they just wrote him off without really doing their research. And I said it at the time, I was confused to why they're rating Heinze and Josh Wolf higher than Neville, because, well, all respect to Josh Wolf, he never had a head coaching job. He's always been an assistant, and they just assumed because he was Berhalter's assistant that he would he would set up his team the same way that the U.S. men's national team played or Columbus played. And now we're seeing that, expansion is hard and it's not going to be a walk in the park. And with Gabriel Heinze, knowing him, just his personality and his coaching style, MLS is a league where you have to follow a certain set of rules, and you can't say, oh, it's my way or the highway. And I knew that was going to just clash with that Atlanta locker room, and they've done it with the poor, and with Hines being the bit of a hard head that he is. We saw his tenure at Atlanta come to an end solely because he wanted too much control, and I knew that it was going to happen inevitably. But at the beginning of the season, people were just writing Phil Neville off, rating these coaches that I didn't see enough from them to place higher over Neville. So I think going back to that, and then coming towards this national media narrative about Inter Miami, they're bad, they'll always be bad. Not a lot of things were written about the club when they were going through that win streak. We're seeing it a lot now. I know that loss on Friday against the Red Bulls was difficult, but and the team has to move on. But Miami, that was their second loss since July 25th, I believe. Yeah, like that's a crazy run, and the power rankings.
It did not translate.
It didn't budge.
I don't understand.
Yeah,
like honestly, it did not. I did not understand how it did not translate. And you look at the power rankings, and it looks like, oh, Inter Miami just skated by this entire time, and it's like, wait a minute, this team. When every other team has a good run, we talk about how that's well deserved. And when Inter Miami has the literal exact same run, we just say, oh, it's a fluke. And that was the confusing part to me.
I want to play devil's advocate here just because I think it's important to.
Of course.
Not that I disagree with anything that you guys are saying, but let's take a look at the run before the Red Bulls loss. And before the 3-1 Toronto win where Gibbs scored the fourth, right? 0-0 to Orlando. That first half was a nightmare. Akindele missed penalty, Marsman making great saves. And then I think they also had a goal that was ruled offside via deflection from Akindele as well. A rough first half, but they stuck it out and got 0-0. Offensively did not create much other than one Pizarro chance off a corner that Gallese made a great save. Then you look at the next match, September 4th against Cincinnati. That's the 1-0 win with what you talked about, Alex, Figal playing a ball to Breck Shea in the 90th minute. Now let's go to the game next Friday against Columbus, a 1-0 win.
Wait. They dominated that Cincinnati match. Let's not like just gloss over.
I don't know if they dominated.
That first half was a bit iffy. I won't lie, but the second half, I do think that they were pushing for a goal. But yeah,
don't think they did enough to convince me that they deserve more than a 1-0 win personally. But anyway, the point is they didn't score until the last second of the match. Then the Columbus game, it's 1-0 due to a errant back pass that Gonzalo Higuain pounced on, and that was really your best chance of the match. And then you go on to the Toronto game. Right after that, another 1-0 game, which was one of the worst Inter Miami matches I have ever watched. And Makoun got that penalty and took it and scored. There were many times where Miami looked like they were on the ropes in these matches. You have to say that. And I think that is not that they don't deserve credit for getting results, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Getting results. They got 9 points in those 3 matches, 10 points if you count the Orlando one. And it moved them into 5th place, right? And that's fine.
I disagree with you, Austin.
But I don't think that they played well enough.
That Cincinnati game
play well enough.
And that Toronto game, they were both in control of.
I cannot say that they were in control of the Toronto game. There's no way. They were not in control of Toronto.
If Nick Marsman let that goal in,
which he did, by the way, but
yeah, Miami would have lost that. And that Toronto game was easily the worst they've played on. It's what I'm thinking about it now. It frustrates me so much because it was Toronto are
heads.
Yeah.
It was hard.
What does this team do to us?
But then you have to make another fair point. The 2 games before that, the Orlando match, the stretch that I was talking about, they had scored six goals in 2 matches and looked fantastic. They looked a great side. Pizarro had those 2 goals against Chicago, then the 3-1 against Toronto. I mean, there were times where they looked really good, and then those 3-1-0 wins, they scrape by and get a victory, in my opinion. At the end of the day, yes, they get the victory, but I don't think that we can give them enough credit to move them up in the power rankings or in the national narrative to say, this team is one of the best in MLS or top 10 in MLS. I'm not at that point.
But in comparison to where Miami were, last season and the beginning of the season, the fact that they are scraping by and fighting and getting results, to me, last season's Inter Miami, they would have lost those games because they did not
100%.
have that fight.
I fully
So,
agree.
yeah. So in terms of the power rankings, a little boost upwards would have been nice because fundamentally this team's mentality has changed since last season. Neville has implemented these guys fight even though they the Rebels games was terrible. Those 1-0 wins, there was some fight in that with McCoon winning that penalty. There was fight. Even the Columbus game, they kept the clean sheet. There was a run where they made 4 straight games without conceding a goal, which Austin, you've talked about that. Just Marsman keeping
it's outstanding. It is outstanding, and I agree. But I can't say that they did enough other than scraping by and getting 3 points, which is enough for me. With the fan in me, that is more than enough, right? McCoon scoring that penalty gave me gracious joy. I was so happy. I was elated. But at the end of the day, I can't say that they played well in the Toronto match. I can't say they played well in the Columbus match. And I do not think they played well enough in the Cincinnati match. And they scared me in the Orlando match. And obviously, if we look at this Red Bulls game, it obviously wasn't enough. So that is where I think the devil's advocate, comes in and says, this is why. I don't think that they have played enough and played well enough on a consistent basis here, other than getting results, which is the only consistency that matters. But on terms of play, I think that it kind of caught up to them. And then the frustration and the yellow cards, that's all caught up to them now. And that's where you see the 4-0, and you have to flip a switch. You have to flip a switch going into this Nashville game, your last game at home for quite a while. You have 4 games on the road, and which is an outstanding road trip, by the way. It's insane, but you have to flip a switch here and get a result, because you can't manage to keep on scraping by. I don't think you're going to have that. And the only thing that I really love about it is really just the clean sheets. Other than that, I think the offensive play was really poor. But other than that's all I can really give them full credit for in that stretch of games.
Austin, I'll ask your patience. We'll talk about the road trip next week. In the interim, we move on to a final sort of understanding in the advent of this club. As we end the show, they really, there was always something missing, and that was a jersey sponsor. I know that that's not very important, but just briefly, XBTO, a cryptocurrency company, decides to become the jersey sponsor for Inter Miami. And now that they have this, now that they're finally, all of these notches have happened, what are we thinking about how this club is moving forward, what that partnership is with them, the crypto entering this space, and what this means for Inter Miami, especially given that crypto has become a very big thing in South Florida?
Yeah, I think that it was almost inevitable. And when you listen to if you have the chance to listen to what Jorge Mas was saying at the event where they unveiled the jersey sponsor, yes, they are the first MLS team to, partner with a crypto company. This is, I believe, XPTO is a crypto finance firm, meaning that they provide the backing for all these cryptocurrencies. They are a cryptocurrency in themselves. So don't go search for XPTO. You're not going to find it and buy it. But they are the first MLS club to partner with a cryptocurrency company, and it's all due, according to Jorge Mas, and I fully agree with him. It's this post-pandemic economy. You wouldn't see something like this able to happen back before 2020. It was more going to be an airline or a cruise line and things like that. But with how the economy, especially in South Florida, where those 2 things I just mentioned are huge, you had American Airlines Arena change to FTX Arena, another, crypto. That's kind of where the landscape is changing into. And I think Miami being able to embrace that, Inter Miami being able to embrace that is a very positive thing. And also at the end of the day, a crypto company can do a lot for sports teams. And I think we're seeing it all around the world, and it brings a very vast, a plethora of options, I should say, in terms of engagement with the fans and the players and what they want to do off the pitch or on game days. And it's just going to spark more interest from people if they can come up with these new activities through cryptocurrencies or through fan tokens or whatever kind of engagement they want to bring up. I think there's a way for them to engage with fans, and I think that that's one of their main goals, and this crypto company is able for them to do that.
Oh, as far as XPTO goes, sorry, I was finding my unmute button. Yeah, the event was great. I think, yeah, I'm still learning a bit about crypto, so I wasn't completely well versed on what actually they were doing. But the owner of the company, his name is slipping me right now. He looked really enthused, and Moss looked enthused, and there was a lot of good things that there was.
Felipe.
Felipe, that's his name.
I believe
He's French.
Philippe.
Felipe. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Philippe.
Yeah, so he looked really enthused, and there's a lot of good things coming as far as that partnership goes. Fan tokens, there's got to be a lot of cool events that Moss said will happen in maybe November, if Miami make the playoffs. But yeah, it was interesting, and like Austin said, with post COVID, or currently COVID going on basically, but that pre COVID, that wouldn't have been able to happen. So yeah, it's a cool sponsor. It's growing on me. I think it looks cool on the shirt, and it was a matter of time before Miami did get a shirt sponsor.
Alex, real fast as we wind up, Fort Lauderdale CF, a frustrating 2-2 draw against Tormenta. They were in control the whole time and couldn't see the 3 points out. Especially in this playoff push, gonna really regret those 2 points that were dropped. What can they do? What do they need to do to make sure that they find a way to get through on this?
Clean up at the back. I know Mabika was not playing this game because he was, there was a potentially he could have been playing with Inter Miami, but due to rules, he's just.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Phil talked about that. I'm gonna ask you to go a little bit brief on this, but Phil wanted Mabika available for this game, and MLS rules didn't allow it. Explain that for the crowd.
Yeah, so basically, Inter Miami it's the hardship rule where under 16 players, you're allowed to call an emergency loan for about 4 days, I believe. But since players like Felipe Valencia, Edison Ascona, George Costa, they're technically signed to the first team. Miami do have over 16 healthy players, so they don't have enough defenders, but they have enough attackers. But some of these guys do play for Fort Lauderdale CF, so they're Mabika just wasn't eligible to be that emergency loan player, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to have seen him play, but is what it is.
What was interesting too is that when I showed up to training before we found out about the rule and what was going to happen, Mabika was there in first team training. He didn't show up on the roster for Fort Lauderdale CF, a game I actually finally got to tune into. Maybe because Romeo Beckham was playing, maybe not, but we won't really go there. Mabika was not on the roster, and I was almost shocked. And when I saw him in training on Monday morning before the press conference, I'm like, okay, well, it's finally coming into fruition. We might see Mabika. And when we finally asked Neville about it, he not only, put down all shots of Mabika being able to play, but he criticized the league and the rule and was upset about the fact that he can't bring up a homegrown player to start for an MLS side, when in reality, that should be the goal for MLS. And the fact that they're limiting that is kind of where he disagrees and where I disagree. And I'm sure a ton of people around the league who are covering the league fully disagree, because Mabika is a homegrown player. They drafted him. He's been playing very well. He should have a chance, especially with what's going on. And this would have been a perfect opportunity, but we lose that because of MLS rules, of course.
And I'm really hoping that we can dive more into that on our brand new YouTube channel that we will have later this week, because I know that we have a lot more thoughts on that, each of us individually at the Heron Outlet, and to hear from what Phil Neville said about it. I think that it's really important to have this conversation, and I don't think that it's unfair to say, well, what happened here? And this is a first round MLS Super Draft pick. And why did that happen? So we'll talk about it later on this week. This has been the regular Heron Outlet podcast. He is Austin Robillard. She is Alex Winley. I am Ian Hess. Please join us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We are so excited for you to join us, and we will talk to you this time next week.